If you're like me, you are a fan of the Pro Tour, not just for the opportunity to watch the game we love, played by people at the peak of their abilities, but also for the stories and legends born in the crucible of top-level competition. In these hallowed halls, those of us who are avid viewers of the Pro Tour have witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties and the establishment of legends and sagas that define each event. Many Pro Tours are referred to not just by the cities that hosted them, but also by a single standout card or strategy. Often this is tied to a legendary or overperforming card, one so dominant in the tournament that there was little else to talk about. But should all Pro Tours really be remembered this way? Which cards by the numbers should define these events? And how does that influence the narrative of each tournament? Looking through this lens, identifying the most prevalent cards, can we spot tournaments where the deck of the tournament didn't actually win? And if we were to build a commemorative deck emblematic of the event, what do the numbers say should represent it? With that in mind, my name is Sam, and welcome to the Jank Drawer, where we will set out to define the true legends of the Pro Tour. As established, our premise is to determine by the numbers which card should have been the legend that defined each Pro Tour. Here, the workflow that I will use to determine that. First, what is the common understanding of the Pro Tour in question? To select our representative, we need to understand the history and narrative of the Pro Tour's metagame, and what the largely expected outcomes were. Second, we'll catalog all the cards played in that tournament. I've written a Python script to assist with this, and with the data it generates, it is very straightforward to see which cards were the most popular. Finally, we compare the hard data with the established narrative, and I'll suggest a commander deck that best embodies the tournament based off of these findings. Without further ado, there's no better place to begin than Atlanta, Georgia, for Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. MagicCon Atlanta followed in the footsteps of earlier MagicCons, bringing almost 20,000 attendees to the Georgia World Congress Center on the final weekend of September 2025. Among them were 299 competitors, each vying for their place in the Magic the Gathering history, all competing for the pinnacle of competitive achievement at the Pro Tour. The format was modern, which had largely stabilized after the shakeups from Modern Horizons 3 and the dramatic return of previously banned cards like Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, Faithless Looting, and Splinter Twin. With two new sets released since the last Pro Tour, Spider-Man and Edge of Eternities, some rogue strategies saw a bump in play, but there were few surprises among the decks registering for a Day 1, in return to form for Modern after the outlier that was Pro Tour Modern Horizons 3. We see a very diverse metagame, with no single deck occupying more than 16% of the meta. There were still three clear best decks going into the tournament. Everyone's Boogeyman coming in at third with Boros Energy. Second place, the fast and innovative Tameshi Belcher strategy, recently invigorated with the plethora of new MDFC lands introduced in Modern Horizons 3, allowed to be mono blue instead of historic red going forward at the top, with some new surprises from Spider-Man making an appearance, Esper's Goryo Vengeance, leading a sizable chunk of metagame, trying to cheat in big creatures early and win based off of the value that those Reanimer strategies employ. That being said, as the tournament progressed, the meta was still wide open, and the turnout for most of these supposed top 3 decks was abysmal, with only 2 copies of Belcher and 1 of Goryo's list making the eventual top 8. The ultimate loser of this weekend being Boros Energy. Expected to be a dominant force, it only saw 1 list make it to the top 16, while the eventual winner, Michael De Benedetto Plummer, piloted Tameshi Belcher to victory, leveraging many of the powerful new MDFC lands from MH3. The talk of the tournament was centered elsewhere. Primary narratives emerging were the healthy state of format, especially after the previously troublesome Pro Tour MH3 where Nadu Winged Wisdom reigned supreme. novel innovation around these Belcher's lists and its impressive tournament run, and most notably, the underperformance of tournament favorite Boros Energy, the third most populous deck in the tournament, surprising many who believed it was the deck to beat. But did it really fall off? To find out, we need to examine all the cards played at Pro Tour Edge of Eternities and their frequencies. While this is information you could manually gather from deck list pages across the internet, I wrote a Python script that generated a CSV file for easier analysis. Looking at our results yields some interesting stats. While this may be remembered as Pro Tour Tameshi or Pro Tour Belcher, Tameshi wasn't even the most represented legend, nor was Belcher the most represented strategy. When you look at the numbers, in fact, Tameshi came in 4th as far as legendary creatures are concerned, behind Ragavan, Atraxa, and most notably, Flage, Titan of Fire's Fury. The most represented legendary creature and the 4th most represented creature across the board, behind Solitude, Quantum Riddler, and Psychic Frog, all powerful creatures in their own right. When we look at these things though, does that make sense? Noting that the most popular decks in this tournament were, in order, Goryo's Vengeance, very focused on getting Atraxa into play, Tameshi Belcher in 2nd, and Boros Energy, which means many copies of Flage and Ragavan. However, this doesn't exactly align with the count of Boros Energy and Belcher decks being 41 Energy to 45 Belcher, or even more surprising, to Esper's Goryo's decks being 50 Goryo's decks to 41 Boros Energy decks. So what could have caused this uptick in there being, in total, 53 more copies of Flage than Tameshi, or even 18 more copies than Atraxa? Even more impressive, there was 22 more copies of Flage than of Ragavan, even though they would have seen a lot of overlap and many of the same lists. Overall, the answer is sleeper performers that came out in this tournament. Best by win rate of the Pro Tour, many control lists, most notably Jeskai strategies using multiple copies of Flage. Additional archetypes like Jeskai Control, Jeskai Blink, or even the few Ruby Storm players that came to this tournament, where often it appears as a sideboard piece to help win in matchups that are otherwise unfavored. And with good reason. We take a look at Flage as a 3-mana 6/6 that enters the battlefield and lightning helixes any target. It's a very powerful effect that leads to a very large life total swings, especially in a format where every point of life matters. Adding the synergy with its Escape and Arena of Glory, allowing you to get a hasty 6/6 ready to deal 9 damage and gain 3 life. The turn it comes into play, Flage, much like its fellow Elder Giant or Uro before its timely modern ban, has become kind of a perennial plan B for a wide range of decks, with its resilience to removal as well as the ability to just overperform when necessary. It's no surprise that based on the numbers, this Pro Tour, while ultimately won by a focused artifact combo deck and the widely anticipated best strategy, Boros Energy, having a dismal performance, I don't think we can discredit that this was Flage's tournament to lose. Between its appearances in many of these Boros Energy decks, and also in a lot of the decks that overperformed by win rate, I think Flage really was the star of this tournament and its current legend. That brings us to our deck. How can we immortalize this Pro Tour around our legend of the Pro Tour? I have used the cards from this tournament to construct what I think is a good Bracket 1 Commander deck, using only the cards from this event that exemplify this Elder Titan and its abilities. I've put this together following the Commander template suggested by the Game Nights crew. I will link to the video in the description where they describe that. I've taken that template and built out this Google sheet that helps you sort cards into groups and determines your deck's requirements based off of the bins that were suggested in that video, of lands, card advantage, ramp, targeted disruption, mass disruption, and plan cards. I've also made it so that the land uses not just the hard and fast rule that was given by the command zone, but also uses the actual math that was behind that idea from Frank Karsten's beautiful articles on the amount of lands that we should be playing in decks. As we walk through the deck, we can see some of the standout cards that were played in this tournament. that I think would fit pretty well into the core themes of what we're trying to do here. We actually don't want to be casting Commander from the command zone all that often. We want to be trying to escape him so that he can stay on the battlefield. We were using it very frequently early on to try and get it out on 3, to Lightning Helix something troublesome, and then start filling our graveyard afterwards, as well as trying to pull in a lot of other very powerful cards and strategies from this Pro Tour to make sure that we are doing just as innately powerful things, which is kind of the theme of Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. We see that most carefully exemplified by the Planeswalker package that we see here, with a lot of very recent additions to the format and to the game in general, along with some of the very powerful pieces that were prevalent in a lot of the colorless strategies exemplified at Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. We have Karn, Liberated, Tezzeret, Cruel Captain, and Ugin, Eye of the Storms, here to really put together a good mix of card advantage, ramp, and powerful colorless effects that are going to help us in our limited card pool. Alongside that, we get to play a lot of powerful cards, which is a Johnny Noctil Pariah, which offers us a lot of the same synergies that are going wide, helping us pump our own life total, as well as, when we eventually flip him, growing our cats, creating more cats, and ultimately, if we can ever get to the -4 ability of this, allowing ourselves to cataclysm our opponents, which is a very powerful effect. Because we're trying to buy time for our inevitable Flage and our big beaters to come into play, along that line we have many points of interaction with Aven Interceptor and Containment Priest. We have card selection in Dragon Rage Channeler. We have some of the bigger payoffs from the Eldrazi decks and from the Goryo's Vengeance decks. In Elishnorn, we have a very good synergy piece with Elishnorn Mother of Machines, allowing us to get twice the doubling effects for our Flages when they enter the battlefields, as well as shutting off any harmful ETBs that our opponents may be playing. We are also playing a lot of just powerful colorless cards and Eldrazi to pair well with our Origins and with our abilities to get fast mana out there. It's all just trying to keep our colorless count high for cards like Fleshraker, allowing us to generate more and more sources of mana as we play a lot of these cheap threats, and then play big colorless cards like the Eldrazi Titans. We're still playing a lot of interesting cards from the new sets. Spider-Punk makes an appearance here because it allows us to play around counterspells, as well as making it so our damage can't be prevented. Also, just a 3-mana 3/2 or a 2-mana 2/1 with haste is a pretty good stat line. Pretty good stat line to have. We get to have great commander staples like Voice of Victory from this tournament, as well as just the modal double-faced cards like Witch Enchanter that allows us to have interaction and targeted disruption on one end and a land on the other. Some great sorceries in this list allowing us to have mass disruption in the form of Wrath of the Skies and Vandal Blast, as well as card advantage from Ren's Resolve, Reckless Impulse, and Glimpse the Impossible. Card selection from Faithless Looting as well. Lots of opportunities again for mass and targeted disruption as well in our instance, allowing us to run Galvanic Discharge, Kozilek's Command, as well as Chain Lightning, the ever-useful Thraben Charm, or Ephemerate, which allows us to get even more benefit out of our ETB triggers by flashing them in on the stack, as well as just maybe doubling our triggers to see more cards or grow our creatures and protect our pieces. There's a lot of things that we can ephemerate here that are pretty good, especially our Solitudes, being able to cheat them in and then leave them around instead of sacking them. Removal as well. As far as artifacts, we get to play some of the more broken artifacts from the history of this format. We get to have Kori Steel Cutter with plenty of low mana drops to be able to bring it in and see the full potential. We'll also be able to play some pretty good acceleration in Mox Amber, Mox Opal, and Ruby Medallion. We get to have a lot of 1s and 0s in here as to be able to partner with the land base that we are running here, having Urza Saga, as well as just the rest of the Urza suite, to accelerate our mana to get to our big colorless objects and generally keep ourselves in line with the hope of being able to have a good mix of lands and spells and eventually living our dream of hasting out a Flage. Plus, another threat on any given turn. We get to have Goblin Bombardment to make sure that we're getting the most out of all of our creatures. with the base shell of our deck being a Boros energy deck that is going to go very wide. We also have a lot of other very powerful enchantments to play alongside that, with Artist Talent giving us the additional benefit to allowing us at stage 3 get to have a reduction on our cost, as well as rummaging through our deck with every non-creature spell. We also get to play Fable of the Murebreaker, which is very good both on the front and the back, giving us ramp and card selection on the front side, and the back side allowing us to create token copies of other non-legendary creatures to play alongside with our Ocelot Prides and our Ajani's. All in all, I think this is a largely unfocused, but still pretty good and acceptable deck that really plays a lot of the who's who and hits of the format that we saw in Edge of Eternity. That being said, for those of you that would want a more focused deck to build around Flage and the power that this Mighty Elder Giant has to contribute to any format, I've also built out a couple of decks at Bracket 1 and Bracket 3 that I think are pretty powerfully able to exemplify its abilities. For those of you who want to have a little bit more emblematic of Flage's power and rage that it can bring to a format, I have built this as well for Bracket 1, using some very powerful cards to enable you to just constantly be recasting and replaying your Flage to get the full benefit out of its Lightning Helix effect, with copies of cards such as Bishop of Rebirth, and once again, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, once again showing up, as well as Sun Titan. Tashar, Ancestor's Apostle, a lot of these cards allow you to continue casting or allow you to get creatures back from your graveyard so you could just continually Flage people over and over again on the same turn. As well as cards like Luminous Broodmoth that allow you to, when you cast it from your command zone, get it twice as well, as it will die and come back with a flying character, and then die again. This is also just some good synergy pieces around it, like Gaffer or Hlaya, that allow you to benefit off of all the life gain you're getting from the Lightning Helixes every turn, so you can get more life than that, as well as you can draw more cards. As well as just a lot more sorceries that allow us to continue doing that, with all these ways that allow us to return target card with mana value 3 or less to the battlefield, as well as just a lot of more mass disruption with Blasphemous Act, Vandal Blast, Wrath of God. We have some instants that allow us to continue going as well as Protector Creatures with Eerie Interlude and Cosmic Intervention, as well as some more targeted disruption with Reprieve or Razorgrass Ambush, allowing us to deal with individual creatures as well as being lands. In our artifacts, there are a lot of things built around either reducing the cost of our Flage in some way, doubling our creature triggers, such as Panharmonicon, or once again, card draw and ramp. We've got our Soul Rings, we've got our Hourglass of the Lost, which is ramp, as well as allowing us to bring our Flage back after we've used it a couple of times. We've got an Archive to allow us to double our life gain, but also double our card draw from a lot of our effects like the Gaffer or like Helia, or like Well of Lost Dreams, because we're going to be gaining a lot of life in this deck, and if we're only ever bringing back our Flage with things like Pre-War Former Lair or all of the other ways that we've been able to bring it back in this list that's not spending mana, we'll have plenty of mana left over to be able to just dump into our Well of Lost Dreams and make sure we constantly have our hand full of our targeted interaction. We have a lot of other good cards in here, the enchantments, and pretty similar and pretty simple land base that is very heavy on plains to go with our Emeria Skyruin. It allows us to get away with a lot of fun interactions that I think is very strong and synergistic way to be able to play around with Flage in an interesting and pretty cost-effective way. For those of you that want even more of a threat though, at a table we do have a Bracket 3 version of this deck that is very similar, the only changes being that we are adding in our 3 game changers that allow us to go to Bracket 3 and taking out some of the less important cards. We're putting in some game changers that I think are going to make some very big differences in this deck. So we're just going to point those out here. We are going to be bringing in Teferi's Protection instead of Eerie Interlude, just because it accomplishes a lot of the same effects that we are looking for from Eerie Interlude at the same price, but even more powerfully as we are removing ourselves from the game. We're also introducing the One Ring, which I think is the single best card advantage engine in the game of Magic the Gathering right now. And finally, we're bringing in Smothering Tithe, because even though it is very important and annoying for our opponents that they have to continually be reminded to pay the 2, we're still in red-white, and there's not a lot that we can do in the way of consistent ramp and making sure that we are performing well and keeping ourselves on curve, especially in a deck that when we look at for our bins for it, we are recommended to be having 32 lands and currently only have 34. Which is surprisingly few, considering that in a lot of these formats, you're going to be wanting to be having closer to 38 or even 40 mana sources. So, other than that, just gives us a lot more consistency, especially when we're trying to hang out at a higher power level, like a bracket 3 would be. With that, I hope that you found this interesting, and as intriguing as I did when I was doing the research. I had a lot of fun learning more about this Pro Tour. And I was honestly surprised by the turnouts from the data. Once we were able to look at all of the cards that were played, and I definitely changed my ideas around. What I perceived when I watched the Pro Tour live and saw the success of a lot of the decks, but also that Modern did a pretty good place. That Modern is in pretty good place. It was a wide open format, and there was a lot going on there. And I think it was really interesting to see the strategies that were at play, and that there was a lot of disappointing results for Boros Energy as a whole. Going to the performance, where it was expected to be the top deck of the format. But the Flage itself performing in and outside of Shells of Boros Energy, specifically in the Jeskai Control and Jeskai Blink decks that performed very well at this tournament, is still very strong and deserving of our title of the Legend of Pro Tour Edge of Eternities. And while it did end up losing, I don't think that there really was a better and more emblematic card that I could think of for this tournament and for Modern as a whole currently than the resilience and consistency of Flage and the general plan B that it can be for so many strategies. With that, thank you for coming. It's been an honor to talk to you all, and I hope that you'll come back again in the future as we look at more of these Pro Tours and see what we can learn about them and their history and the cards that really showed up in mass. It's been my pleasure having you here again in the Jank Drawer. I've been Sam, and this has been Legends of the Pro Tour. If you've enjoyed your time in this video, please like and subscribe. Every bit of engagement matters and counts, and we look forward to talking to you again in the future. See you next time.